My brothers! The Detroit Lions Super Bowl window is not closing. If anything, the biggest question surrounding this team right now should be the exact opposite. Has the window finally opened? That is the point that makes the latest discussion so frustrating for Lions fans. The idea that Detroit's Super Bowl opportunity is somehow disappearing simply does not match the reality of the team's core. When you look at the players who are 25 years old or younger, the Lions have an incredible group of star talent that is still entering or already reaching the best years of their careers. Penei Sewell is 25 years old. Amon-Ra St. Brown is 25. Sam LaPorta is 25. Jameson Williams is 25. The Lions also have one of the best defensive ends in the league, one of the best linebackers in the league, and Kirby Joseph with his own place among the young defensive stars of this team. This is not an old roster that is desperately trying to win one final championship before everything falls apart. This is a young core that has already accomplished more than many people expected at this stage, and it is still developing. That is why the idea that Detroit's Super Bowl window has closed feels so premature. The Lions reached the NFC Championship game before many people expected them to get that far. They exceeded expectations, built a team that could compete at the highest level, and now the core of that team is still extremely young. When your best players are 23, 24, and 25 years old, it is difficult to argue that the opportunity is disappearing. In reality, this could be the beginning of the most important part of the Lions championship window. And there is another factor that cannot be ignored: Jared Goff. The way Goff plays the quarterback position could allow him to remain effective for a long time. He does not depend on being a quarterback who constantly has to win with his legs. His game is built around reading the field, making decisions, operating from the pocket, and delivering the football. That gives the Lions another reason to believe this team can remain competitive for years. The Lions are not looking at a situation where their entire future depends on one short opportunity. The core is young, the quarterback can potentially continue playing at a high level for a long time, and the team has already shown that it can compete deep into the postseason. So, instead of asking whether Detroit's Super Bowl window is closed, the better question may be whether the window is only beginning to open. And that brings us to three players who could be especially important for the Lions moving forward. The first name is Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco is one of the most intriguing players to watch because even before talking about his production on the field, he appears to bring many of the qualities that can make a player important to a team. He brings energy, he runs hard, he has the personality and intensity that immediately stand out. Even his interactions with the media team have shown a player who brings a lot of energy to the building. But the biggest question is simple: what does Isaiah Pacheco look like when he is fully healthy again? The Chiefs moved on from him and the Lions brought him in without having to make a major investment. Pacheco has dealt with a significant injury and 2 seasons affected by injuries, so the Lions need to find out exactly what version of the player they have now. Is he back to full speed? Can he return to the form that made him such an exciting player? That is what makes his situation so interesting, because when you look at the Lions running back room, the comparison with David Montgomery naturally comes into the conversation. But this is not about replacing Montgomery or pretending that Montgomery is not an excellent player. David Montgomery is a very good running back, and everyone already knows what he can bring. The possibility is that Pacheco could give Detroit another powerful option and create a dangerous 1-2 punch in the backfield. If he can return to his best form, his energy, physical running style, and explosiveness could become a major part of the Lions' offense. The second player to watch is Penei Sewell. Usually, when people talk about players to watch, they mention an up-and-coming player who is trying to prove himself. But with Sewell, the situation is completely different. This is already one of the best football players in the league. The question is not whether Penei Sewell can become a star. He already is one. The interesting part is that Sewell could be asked to play left tackle again. Many people forget that his very first start came at left tackle. He was extremely young at the time, and he was suddenly thrown into the lineup against a Bosa brother, and yet he handled the situation. Then Taylor Decker returned, and Sewell moved to right tackle. From there, he developed into one of the best players in football. Now, the possibility of seeing him at left tackle again creates another fascinating storyline for the Lions. This is not simply about moving a player around because of a temporary need. This is about one of the best best offensive linemen in the league, potentially taking on a different role while continuing to be one of the most important players on the roster. Penei Sewell is not just the future of the offensive line, he is already the present. The third player to watch is Jameson Williams. Williams has already shown that he can be a 1,000-yard receiver, and now the expectation is that he can continue building on that production. The most important part of his development is that he is no longer simply a player. People are asking, what could he become? Now, we have seen what he can do. He is a 1,000-yard receiver. He has the speed to change games. He has the ability to create explosive plays. And importantly, the situation around him appears to be much more stable than the constant questions that followed him earlier in his career. The Lions have a player who can stretch the field, create opportunities for the rest of the offense, and continue to grow into an even bigger part of the attack. And then there is Sam LaPorta. This may be one of the most important storylines of all. LaPorta has been dealing with injuries and has not always been able to stay consistently on the field. Last season, the situation became especially difficult, with him eventually missing the second half of the year. That is a major loss for any offense because LaPorta is simply a very good football player. The Lions saw what he could do during his rookie season. They saw the talent, they saw the playmaking ability, but injuries have continued to interrupt his progress. Now, the hope is that LaPorta can finally enter a season healthy and truly establish himself in his prime. That is why his situation is so exciting. The Lions are not adding a completely unknown player. They already know exactly how talented Sam LaPorta can be. The question is whether he can finally stay healthy long enough to show that ability consistently. There is also a new connection that could make his development even more interesting. The Lions hired Drew Petzing, who previously worked with the Cardinals, and Trey McBride has been one of the players who showed just how dangerous that tight end position can be in that system. McBride reportedly encouraged LaPorta this offseason, telling him that he was going to have a great career, and when you already have the talent that LaPorta has, the possibility of a healthy season could change everything for the Lions offense. The offensive line is another major factor. Last season, the unit had to deal with too many problems. Graham Glasgow had a difficult task moving into the center position. The guard situation was not ideal, and Taylor Decker also dealt with injuries. When the offensive line is healthy and playing at a high level, everything changes. The quarterback has more time. The running game becomes more consistent. The receivers have more time to get open. The entire offense becomes more dangerous. That is why the Lions should not be viewed as a team whose best opportunity has already passed. They have a young core. They have star players who are still 25 years old or younger. They have a quarterback who can potentially continue playing at a high level for many years. They have players returning from injuries who could make a significant difference. And they have already proven that they can reach the NFC Championship game. The NFC North will not be easy. The Bears could have a high ceiling if Caleb Williams continues to improve, although there are still plenty of questions surrounding how that situation develops. The Packers continue to be a solid team, even when people underestimate them. The Vikings are also capable of being competitive, but the Lions have a legitimate chance to win this division, and if they do, there is a real path toward another run to the NFC Championship game. At that point, the question becomes whether Detroit can take the final step. But before we even get there, the most important thing is this: the Lions are not watching their championship window disappear. The core is still young, the talent is still there, and several key players could be ready to take another step forward. So, Lions fans, do you believe the Super Bowl window is actually closing, or do you think Detroit's championship window is just beginning to open? Because that is what separates a talented team from a team that can truly make a deep playoff run. The Lions already have the talent. They already have the young stars. They already have players who have proven they can perform at a high level. The next step is keeping those players healthy and getting the entire team to play at its best when the most important games arrive, and that is why the health of players like Sam LaPorta could be so important. The Lions have already seen what happens when important pieces are missing. The offensive line struggled with injuries and constant changes. LaPorta was not consistently available. When several important players are not on the field, it becomes much more difficult for any team to play at its highest level. But if Detroit can get a healthy offensive line, a healthy Sam LaPorta, and continued development from players like Jameson Williams, the offense could look very different different. The potential is already there. You have Amon-Ra St. who has established himself as one of the best receivers in football. You have Jameson Williams bringing explosive speed and coming off a 1,000-yard season. You have Sam LaPorta, who showed during his rookie season that he can be a major weapon at tight end. You have David Montgomery, and now the possibility of seeing what Isaiah Pacheco can bring to the backfield. And then you have Jared Goff operating the offense. That is a lot of talent in one group. This is also why the idea that the Lions Super Bowl window has closed feels so difficult to understand. A team with an aging core and major holes across the roster might have a legitimate reason to worry about the future, but that is not the situation Detroit is facing. The Lions have young stars at some of the most important positions on the field. Penei Sewell is still only 25 years old. Amon-Ra St. is still only 25. Sam LaPorta is 25. Jameson Williams is 25. And the defense also has young talent that can continue to develop. This is the kind of core that gives a team a chance to compete for several years. Of course, nothing is guaranteed in the NFL. That is the part every fan understands. Injuries can change everything. A team can have the best roster in the league and still lose in January. One bad game, one bad matchup, one critical mistake, and a season can end. But that is very different from saying the window is closed. The Lions are still in a position where they can win the NFC North. They are still in a position where they can reach the NFC Championship game. And once a team reaches that stage, anything can happen. That is where this team should be right now. The goal should not be to panic because the Lions did not win the Super Bowl immediately after reaching the NFC Championship game. The goal should be to understand that Detroit has built something that can continue competing. The team has already proven that the foundation is real.